Hey, good to see you again. This is Unit 4, where we are going to discuss the circulatory and respiratory systems. Circulatory system is covered in Chapter 4. Let's get to our content here. This will again be a two-part mini lecture, so we will cover the circulatory system in the first component. So let's look at the list of blood components. Certainly when we talk about the circulatory system, blood separates into a fluid portion and an element portion, just as you see in the diagram on the right. If you take a sample of blood and put it into a spinner machine, it'll separate out the albumin, which is the major protein in blood, maintains water in the bloodstream, globulins, which is your antibodies that help you fight disease, and then fibrinogen, which is the blood clotting agent, which is, of course, very, very important. In addition, we can take that formed elements component of blood and divide them into three fractions, where we have red blood cells that are your oxygen carrier, white blood cells, which are your disease fighters, and platelets, which are more specifically what helps in the clotting agent in blood. So let's look at the functions of blood. First and foremost, its job is to transport substances, whether it's nutrition, whether it's hormones, minerals, whatever it might be. Second, its next most important responsibility is to help protect against infectious disease. So carrying those white blood cells to help fight off any invasive pathogen that might encounter the body. And then finally, to help maintain homeostasis or equilibrium within the body. At the right here is a diagram published in your textbook that shows a little bit about what is typically in blood based upon different species. Okay, let's look at the mammalian heart structure. Again, it's a four-chambered heart. You should know that. Good basic high school or junior high biology. Two separate circulatory paths: the pulmonary side and the systemic circulation side. Generally located somewhat lower in the chest, right between the two lungs, and protected by what we call a pericardium or a pericardial sac. It's a very hollow, muscular, striated muscle organ. So the flow of the blood returns from systemic circulation to the heart, delivered oxygen and nutrients, picks up carbon dioxide and other waste products as it circulates through the body, and then disposes of those at the appropriate points. So we're going to jump into the next slide here because it shows a quick video.
The heart pumps blood throughout the body, carrying oxygen and nutrients to every cell. It's this circulation of blood that is vital to sustaining life. The heart is an organ made up of several tough layers of muscle. The pericardium is the thin layer that covers the exterior, while the endocardium lines the inside walls. The heart is divided into four chambers, two upper and two lower. The upper chambers, known as the atrium, receive blood coming into the heart. The lower chambers are the ventricles that pump blood out. Between each chamber are valves that open and close and help keep the blood moving. They are the tricuspid, mitral, pulmonary, and aortic valves. A pumping cycle starts when oxygen-depleted blood returns to the heart after circulating throughout the body. The blood enters through the right atrium before flowing to the right ventricle. It's then pumped to the lungs via the pulmonary arteries. There, blood is rejuvenated by air that's breathed in. The oxygen-rich blood returns to the heart through the left atrium, where it goes to the left ventricle. Then, by way of the aorta artery, the fresh blood is pumped throughout the body before the process repeats itself. That process happens with every heartbeat, and it's relentless. The heart beats 100,000 times a day, 40 million times a year, and up to 3 billion times over an average lifespan. But there are conditions that can disrupt a heartbeat and that normality. They can range from myocardial infarction or a heart attack to heart disease and hypertension. In contrast, exercise and emotional excitement can also have an impact on a person's heartbeat. The various blood vessels that comprise the circulatory system are a network of veins, arteries, and capillaries that span over 60,000 miles throughout the body. And the heart is the pump at the center of it.
I thought that would be helpful to kind of diagrammatically show you exactly how blood moves, especially through the heart, into the body. So that systemic circulation has to overcome, of course, the effects of gravity. Has to be strong enough. The heart has to be strong enough, and the circulatory system to pump blood up against gravity towards the brain, and have to get it up from the feet. So almost all vessels flow, the pathway of an artery, arterial, capillary, venule, and vein structures. So when we look at clinical significance, we understand that that beats normally, just as was explained in the video. But of course, we have specialized cells, as we have had in every other example so far in the course. What we call pacemaker cells that are responsible for keeping the beat, so to speak, that rhythm that the heart should have. All right, kind of another diagram here, side-by-side diagrams of anatomy of the heart and blood flow. I'll let you discern whether you want to go back and look at the video or utilize these diagrams for answering the questions that we may encounter here in the module and the assessment pieces. But I thought these were good spots to kind of let you pause and take a look at what's available in terms of how blood moves through the system diagrammatically. When we look at electrocardiograms, heart sounds, and blood pressure, it's important from a clinical significance perspective that the atrioventricular, the AV node, sends the electrical signal to kind of trigger that pacemaker ability to keep the heart pumping on cycle. So a cardiac cycle is one complete contraction and relaxation, the systolic and the diastolic phases when you're checking blood pressure. So we have small little ions that causes that electrical current is what triggers those things to work. And then, of course, when we get things out of whack from that normal, consistent sinus rhythm, or have arrhythmias, how we call that, then you may have to undergo something like what we call CPR to try and stimulate the heart to get back into rhythm. There's a lot of different things that are going on this slide, and kind of gives you a simulated what that sound would be if you put a stethoscope on and stick it to the side of a cow or your horse, what you should hear. And you should be able to count beats so you know what the typical heartbeat. That's certainly important whenever diagnosing potential disease problems. You can also have what we call murmurs, or a swishing sound, where sometimes those valves aren't operating properly. You can develop a murmur, and those are something to follow very closely. So that autonomic nervous system aids in the control of that heart rate, helping regulate how quickly or how slowly the heart will pump, and generally maintains that pressure within a pretty tight range. And whenever called upon to pump blood faster, that response is very, very rapid whenever needed to get blood pumping quicker through the circulatory system. So, of course, blood is very, very important in helping with disease diagnostics, and oftentimes indicated by prefixes or suffixes. So if you see something that says hypo, that means blood levels were below normal, or hyper, blood levels were above normal. If you see an emia, that's levels in the bloodstream. Apnea, less than normal. A cytosis, which is an elevated count. So, for example, I mentioned before hypocalcemia. That'd be where you test blood and there's actually low blood calcium. A little bit on the anemia, which is really reserved for talking about the red blood count. And things that can lead to anemic conditions is the loss of blood from trauma, intestinal parasites, toxins, or some kind of autoimmune disorder. Again, wrapping up the section here with a little bit of clinical practice. If an animal goes into shock, sometimes we have a condition where not enough blood is pumped through the vital tissues. So we can have systems where hypovolemic or even sepsis, which is infection within the body. So there's a lot of different things in addition to shock that can cause trouble with blood pressure, whether it's a buildup in your arteries, some kind of other disease, or so forth. Of course, then you can't talk about the heart function without talking about heart failure, where the heart loses its ability to distribute blood and pump strong enough to keep blood flowing through the extremities or even keep it oxygenated enough. And you need radiographs or x rays to help determining and diagnosing a system of heart failure or even ultrasounds. The image that's on the bottom right here is of a heart that is infected. You can see all the red splotchy tissue that's all around here. That should be nice and healthy pink. So you've obviously got a significant infection going on in this situation. So let's pause there a second. The boys here want a snack, so take a break, come back, and we'll hit the next mini lecture. Thank you.